My son completely drained my entire bank account and then took his wife and her mother on a trip to Rome. I simply smiled to myself. 3 days later, the phone rang, and he was sobbing. "Mom, what have you done?" My retribution was absolute. The day I most desperately needed to take a breath was the very day my son took every single dollar, without even bothering to leave a note. Eleanor Ellie Price froze for a prolonged moment. She remained seated in her old, well-worn cloth armchair, the exact chair she had purchased when Jackson was 7, using the first respectable paycheck she earned cleaning residences in the Hollywood Hills. Before her, the cell phone screen illuminated, displaying a notification that sent a profound chill through her veins. Available balance. $0. She read it again, then a third time, and a fourth. Her hands were shaking, not from her age, though she was a sturdy 68 years old, but from something much deeper, a sickening knot that tightens when the soul comprehends, but the heart stubbornly refuses to accept. She phoned the bank. A robot answered first, followed by a human representative who proceeded to ask a series of questions. They informed her that the transactions had been executed online. Large-sum wire transfers that totaled over $80,000. It represented her life's entire effort. Her savings, her security, her sole safety net. "And where did the money go?" she inquired, her voice brittle, as if she already knew the reply, but needed to hear it from an external source. "It was all transferred to an account under the name of Jackson Arthur Price," the executive responded, his tone impersonal. "Ma'am, do you wish to file a fraud report?" Ellie offered no reply. She ended the call without uttering a single word. Silence enveloped the house. The only disturbances were the clock's quiet ticking in the kitchen and the low, persistent buzz of a dying fluorescent light bulb. Outside, the ice cream truck played its recognizable melody, completely unaware of the chasm that had just opened within her. Then, the landline rang, the antique telephone she kept merely out of habit. "Hello," she answered, her voice sounding flat and distant. "Ellie, honey, did you see your Jackson's Instagram?" It was the excited voice of Doris, her longtime neighbor. "He's in Rome, child, eating fancy food with his wife and mother-in-law." Lord, what a life they lead. They look like actual movie stars. Ellie forced herself to swallow. Her spirit felt as though it momentarily abandoned her body. She walked slowly toward her bedroom, opened the drawer where she stored her old smartphone, and searched for her son's profile. She wasn't active on social media, but she followed him from a distance, like a person peering through a window at a life that no longer considered her a part of it. There he was. Jackson, her only son, the boy she had brought into the world with immense pain and raised completely alone since his father abandoned them for another woman. The same son to whom she had given everything, even the family property her parents had bequeathed her, just so he could attend college. He was beaming, a drink in his hand, dressed in a crisp white shirt, embracing Tanya, his wife, and Rhonda, the mother-in-law who had perpetually looked down on Ellie. The photo caption read, "Rome, my new beginning. I deserve this." And in the comments, Tanya had written, "Good things come to those who wait. Thanks for everything, Mama-in-law," followed by a money emoji. Ellie didn't shed a tear. She didn't scream or smash anything. She merely stood there, clutching the phone as if it were a scorching hot brick. Then, unnoticed by anyone, she smiled. But it was a peculiar kind of smile, as if she had finally grasped a profound truth she had spent years deliberately avoiding. Far away, beneath a clouded sky and on the ancient cobblestone streets of Rome, Jackson raised his glass, free of any apparent guilt. "See?" Tanya murmured, taking a slow sip of expensive wine. "It was a brilliant idea to take the money. She's going to pass away soon anyway. Better we use it before it all goes to medical bills." Rhonda, her mother, let out a harsh, dry laugh. "Clueless old woman. She doesn't even know what an airplane is. She was never going to do anything constructive with that cash." Jackson remained silent. He looked out at the Colosseum, his eyes shining. Something was unsettling him deep inside, but he remained quiet, just as he had been conditioned to do since he was a small, hungry boy, and his mother would always tell him, "Hold on, baby. We'll have it tomorrow." The walls of Ellie's house appeared older that night. Everything was exactly in its proper place, yet nothing felt quite the same. On the shelf sat photographs of Jackson, tiny in preschool, wearing his first middle school uniform the day he received his college degree. Every single thing she had ever done, she had done for him. At age 18, she sold her engagement ring to pay for his high school tuition. At 23, she gave him the family land her father left her. At 30, she contributed toward the wedding costs. Even though Tanya had never shown her any real affection, Ellie cooked for him, laundered his clothes and tidied up after him, and yet he only drifted further away. "Mom, you just don't understand this world," he would dismissively state. "Things aren't done the way they used to be. Tanya and I have grand plans, and I'm a part of those plans, too. You'll always be in my heart, Mama, but you can't be tied to me for life." A week before discovering the ultimate betrayal, Ellie had attempted to visit Jackson at his apartment in Studio City. She had brought a platter of her famous fried chicken and the collard greens she made herself. She rang the doorbell. No one answered the door. She waited for 2 hours under the sun, sitting on a public bench, until the doorman approached her. "Are you looking for Mr. Jackson Price?" "Yes, I'm his mother." "Ah, well, I was instructed not to let you in if you arrive unannounced." Ellie swallowed hard. "And why would that be?" "I couldn't tell you, ma'am. But those were the instructions I received." She walked back home. She decided against taking the metro bus. She wanted the air to hit her face, even if it was hot and polluted. She thought of every meal she had gone without, every dawn she worked overtime, every single cent she had put aside for her son. That same night, Doris came over to visit. She brought pecan pie and coffee. "You've always been tough, Ellie. Don't allow this to crush your spirit. Jackson is young. Perhaps he'll eventually come to his senses." Ellie sighed, her gaze unfocused. "Do you truly believe children ever come to regret their actions, Doris?" "Yes, of course they do. When their mother is no longer around, that's when they realize everything." "Well, I truly hope it's not too late when he does realize it. And what exactly are you planning to do?" Ellie looked up. In her eyes there was a new expression, something that had never been there before. "I'm going to smile just the way they trained me to." Doris frowned. "Smile? What are you talking about?" "I've cried enough, Doris. Now I'm going to smile in silence because I have absolutely nothing left to lose." And when a woman has nothing left to lose, she transforms into a dangerous force. Meanwhile, dusk was settling in Rome. Jackson was just stepping out of the shower when he heard Tanya's voice speaking on the phone from the balcony. "Yes, we did it. The old woman never even suspected a thing. The money's safely here. Tomorrow we open the account in Spain, and then we get rid of Jackson." "Yes, of course. He truly believes we're in this together." Such a fool. Jackson stopped dead in his tracks. He didn't move an inch. He could feel the cold water droplets freezing on his skin. He said nothing. He returned to the room acting as if he hadn't overheard anything. He lay down beside Tanya, who was expertly feigning sleep. He closed his eyes, but something fundamental had shifted, and he had no idea yet that the worst was rapidly approaching. Back in south-central Los Angeles, Ellie was preparing herself a cup of chamomile tea. The night felt heavy and dense. The streetlights flickered erratically. Outside, dogs fought over a discarded trash bag. Inside, she picked up her notebook, the one she used for jotting down recipes she never found the time to cook. With her shaky handwriting, she wrote something down. "This is not the end. It is the beginning of my silence, and my silence will inflict more pain than any scream ever could." She then closed the notebook, settled into her bed, and for the first time in a very long time, she slept without tears, and while she slept peacefully in her modest home, her son, in a luxurious hotel suite in Rome, checked his phone. He found a bank notification, account blocked due to suspicious activity. "What?" he muttered, staring blankly at the screen. The first crack in his perfect plan had just appeared, and Jackson was completely oblivious that his mother, in her profound silence, had already begun to make her move. Sometimes pain doesn't shriek. Sometimes pain merely sits, watches, and waits patiently for the precise moment. And that moment was only just beginning. The night had not entirely lifted over South Central. There was still that familiar, sticky humidity lingering between the corrugated tin roofs and the broken pavement. Ellie rose at dawn, her bones cracking and groaning as they did every morning. But this time she didn't feel frail or old. Something new was vigorously beating inside her chest. It wasn't simple anger or sorrow. It was a firm resolve her soul had never experienced before. While heating water on the gas stove, she fixed her gaze on the steady blue flame. The kettle's whistle took her back many years, to the very first day she understood the feeling of being utterly alone. She was 14 when she began cleaning homes in the Brentwood neighborhood, a girl with poorly braided hair, dark skin, and hands raw and cracked from using cheap soap. By that age, she already knew the names of every stain remover and exactly how to fold a boss's shirts without causing a single wrinkle. At night, when she returned home, her mother was no longer waiting up for her. She was already asleep. Her absent father had vanished with a woman he met at a bar. Ellie didn't weep. She just swallowed her pain, and the following day, she woke up before the rooster crowed to return to work. At 17, she became pregnant with Jackson. His father was a boy 3 years her senior. He had promised they would marry, that he would rescue her from that hard life. Their relationship lasted 8 months. The day he learned the baby was a boy, he disappeared. He left with a woman who sold cosmetics and never reappeared. Ellie didn't cry. She just clenched her jaw, adjusted her scarf, and headed out to find more houses to clean. She raised Jackson on her own, carrying him strapped to her back while she washed other people's laundry. When he started walking, she taught him to play with detergent caps as if they were toy cars. They had no real toys, but they had captivating stories. No refrigerator, but they always had warm soup. No television, but they had the songs she sang to him until he drifted off to sleep. He was literally her entire universe. When Jackson turned 6, one of Ellie's clients offered to pay for his elementary school tuition at a private institution if she agreed to work full-time and take up residence on the property. Ellie accepted instantly. She left her own house, lived in the patron's rooftop apartment, and every single weekend she crossed the city to see her son. She never arrived empty-handed. Sometimes a brand new notebook, sometimes just a simple snack, but always with a heart prepared to listen to anything Jackson wished to share with her. Years passed quickly, and Jackson matured. Ellie struggled to learn how to sign her name, her hand trembling as she filled out school paperwork as the responsible party. She learned to read doctors' prescriptions and eventually bank statements. She couldn't write flawlessly, but she understood enough to ensure she wouldn't be taken advantage of, or so she believed. At 16, Jackson told her, "Mom, when I make it big, the first thing I'll do is buy you a house where the cold can't seep through the walls." And she replied immediately, "Don't buy me anything, son. Just promise you won't forget me." Then came college. Ellie sold the only piece of land her father had left her, a small patch of earth in rural Georgia, where she had always dreamed of building a little cabin. She sold it for significantly less than its true market value because Jackson urgently needed to cover the enrollment fees. As always, she didn't waver for an instant. "My son is going to become an accountant," she proudly informed her neighbors. "He's going to lift himself out of this life." And he did rise out, though not in the manner she had pictured. It was during his 3rd semester that he encountered Tanya, a woman with sleek, straight hair, long manicured nails, and a smile that seemed lifted from a magazine. From the moment Ellie first saw her, a sickening lurch tightened in her stomach. It wasn't rooted in jealousy or envy, but rather the unsettling sense that this woman was inherently a taker, someone who only understood receiving and never giving. Tanya belonged to a family that constantly projected an image of wealth they didn't possess. Her mother, Rhonda, wore imitation designer clothing and spoke with an air suggesting she had been educated in Europe. The first time they visited Ellie's modest home, they subtly expressed their distaste. "Oh, what a charming shade," Rhonda commented with a hint of sarcasm. "The walls possess such a rustic feel." Tanya, observing the small kitchen, made a quiet remark that Ellie would never forget. "I don't know how Jackson managed to grow up in here. This looks like a shelter, not an actual home." Ellie responded with her usual smile, yet something vital broke inside her. As the years progressed, Tanya progressively exerted more control. First, she requested that Ellie stop visiting so frequently. Then, she asked her not to offer opinions on their joint decisions. Finally, she suggested Ellie skip certain family functions because she simply didn't fit in. Jackson, confused and blinded by infatuation, slowly but surely drifted away. One evening, after already moving in with Tanya, Jackson came to see his mother. It was the final time he did so without any prior warning. She prepared him a pot roast with gravy, his favorite dinner. "Son, Tanya suggests that I'm too involved in your lives, that I'm not allowing you to develop as a couple," Ellie said, watching her own plate of food grow cold. "I don't require you to look after me anymore," he replied, a statement that stung her deeply. "I'm a grown man now, and men sometimes forget who made them who they are." Ellie didn't cry. She simply rose, cleared the table, and insisted he take the remaining roast with him. The subsequent months were marked by a procession of subtle pushbacks. Tanya began overseeing Jackson's finances, persuaded him to switch bank accounts, and instructed him not to disclose everything to his mother. In Tanya's view, Ellie was a limited woman who couldn't grasp the complexities of modern life. Jackson, entangled in a mesh of ambition and emotional manipulation, complied. Ellie started noticing discrepancies. A bank receipt that seemed incorrect, a statement that inexplicably failed to arrive, a life insurance policy she had no memory of authorizing. It was then she decided to approach Walter. Walter was her first childhood sweetheart, a former neighbor who had worked as an attorney for decades and now lived alone, surrounded by old files and memories. She sought him out without revealing the full story. "Walter, how would I go about finding out if someone is improperly using my identity for strange activities?" "Are you in some kind of trouble, Ellie?" "No, but I have this feeling that my son isn't truly my son anymore." Walter scrutinized her carefully, asked for the few documents she possessed, and for several weeks meticulously reviewed transactions, legal papers, and transfers. One night, he invited her to his apartment. "Ellie, your son established a joint account and listed you as a guarantor. You never signed anything, but the signature is clearly present." "But I don't know how to write anything more than my name," she whispered. "They forged your signature, and they have been gradually withdrawing funds for the past 6 months." Ellie said absolutely nothing. She collected the documents, placed them into her purse, and departed in silence. That night, the anguish prevented her from sleeping, not because of the money, but because of the crushing truth. Her son hadn't merely been manipulated, he had become an active participant in the betrayal. He had stolen from his own mother. In the days that followed, Tanya and Rhonda finalized the details for the Rome trip. Jackson, lacking a steady income, sold his car and then proposed using Ellie's savings. "It's family money," Tanya reasoned. "Besides, your mother won't ever use it. Don't be ridiculous. Better we use it early. I don't know. It's everything she owns. And why is she hoarding it? You are her son. You're not stealing it. You're simply borrowing it ahead of time." Jackson hesitated, but ultimately he proceeded. One night, from his home computer, he executed the transfer of all the funds. He did it rapidly without allowing himself to think too much, like someone yanking out a tooth without anesthesia. He finished, drew a deep breath, shut the laptop, and refused to look back. Ellie uncovered the betrayal the following day. She didn't cry. She didn't scream. She merely wrote a sentence in her notebook. "My son didn't die, but the mother in me certainly did." From that moment on, everything shifted. Her physical body continued its aging process, but her spirit became steely. She began walking with a different gait, her back held straighter. She started making phone calls, checking emails, and visiting various offices. Something was being meticulously prepared. While Jackson strolled the ancient stone streets of Rome, believing he had achieved a victory back in south-central Los Angeles, his mother was weaving the intricate web that would reclaim everything they had taken from her. And Tanya? Tanya was already laying the groundwork for her own seamless escape. What Jackson failed to grasp was that Ellie was no longer the woman he remembered. That woman had perished. In her place remained a mother who was wounded but intensely alert. And when an injured mother awakens, there is no hell she is unwilling to traverse. The act of betrayal itself no longer caused pain. What truly hurt was the devastating certainty of having been invisible, of having been used, of being completely erased as if she had never mattered at all. But Ellie was determined not to fade away in silence, because what mothers choose to keep quiet can be just as lethal. Ellie said nothing. Not that time, not the next time, and not the one after that. Her silence was no longer the kind that festers internally. It was a razor-sharp silence, one that observes, records, and calculates. The words dried up in her throat, as if they no longer held any meaning. Because when a mother realizes she's been replaced by a false facade, she stops screaming. She transforms. Jackson failed to notice the change, or perhaps he chose not to. He was too consumed with living the life he had always dreamed of. A life that didn't smell of fresh laundry or brewed coffee. A life where the voice waking him didn't utter, "My baby boy," but, "Sir," a sterile, elegant, and ultimately hollow existence. Tanya seamlessly integrated into his world as if she had always been its rightful owner. And he, utterly captivated, let her. He was mesmerized by the vocabulary she used that Ellie never did, by the graceful way she walked in high heels, by the manner she referenced things as if everything in the world belonged to her. But hidden behind her effortless laugh and picture-perfect photos was a subtle, cruel, and highly precise mechanism. Tanya knew exactly what she desired, and she wanted it fast. A prestigious name, a reputable surname, a healthy bank account, and a man who could sustain her elaborate illusion. The first critical comments came disguised as light-hearted jokes. "Honey, why must your mother always have an opinion on every single thing?" she'd ask. "I don't want our child to grow up surrounded by poverty-level thinking," she declared, while casually painting her nails in the living room. Jackson responded with an uneasy chuckle. "It's not that she wants to have an opinion. It's just difficult for her to relinquish control. She's always been like that. It's not control, Jackson. It's pity disguised as love. Women like your mother believe they're martyrs for raising kids alone, but they fail to realize that the past doesn't grant us the right to drag others down. I won't stand for that for you, for me, or for our future children." Gradually, Tanya began dictating when they could visit Ellie and when they could not. Initially, it was because they were too busy. Then, it became better to meet in public places. Finally, she claimed she didn't feel comfortable entering Ellie's house because it smelled musty. Jackson passively accepted every excuse, and whenever Ellie asked why they weren't visiting as often, he would simply lower his head. "We just have too much going on, Mom. You know, work, wedding planning." Ellie only nodded, but the innocence in her eyes had completely vanished. She was slowly assembling the pieces of the puzzle, like someone meticulously hand-stitching a deeply torn sack. Rhonda, Tanya's mother, wasted no time in inserting herself into the situation. Never with explicit insults, but always with carefully chosen phrases designed to sound sophisticated, yet carrying just enough edge to wound. "Miss Eleanor, please forgive me if I'm being too direct. But didn't you ever consider relocating to a more appropriate neighborhood? I mean, you're getting older now. This area simply isn't safe for someone your age, and with that money you've saved, you could easily buy something much better, couldn't you?" Ellie looked directly into Rhonda's eyes. She didn't blink or speak, but something deep inside her soul fractured. That day, she understood that they didn't merely want her at a distance. They never wanted her nearby at all. One Sunday during a family lunch organized by Tanya, Ellie decided to confront her son. She waited for the moment Rhonda went to the restroom, and Tanya was preoccupied with her phone. She looked at Jackson with the same enduring love, but her voice held a new firmness. "Son, are you absolutely sure this woman is the right person for you? Have you noticed the way she looks at you when you're not paying attention? The way she speaks about me?" Jackson hesitated, swallowing hard. Tanya instantly looked up from her phone. Rhonda had just re-entered the room. The atmosphere shifted dramatically, like the sudden onset of a thunderstorm. And then Jackson erupted. "That is enough! Mom, you're just jealous because I have another important woman in my life now. You won't say it, but you definitely think it. You never could stand for anyone else to be important to me." Ellie didn't try to defend herself. She didn't even flinch. She simply lowered her gaze to her plate, placed her fork down, and in that crushing silence, she knew the fight to keep him was over. When they said their goodbyes that afternoon, no one offered her a hug. Upon arriving back at her house, she meticulously removed her shoes, as if afraid to disturb anyone, despite being completely alone. She sat on her bed and desperately tried to recall the last time her son had said, "I love you," without her having to ask him first. She couldn't remember. The following weeks were a personalized hell disguised as mundane routine. Tanya and Rhonda began visiting Jackson more often at his office. They brought him lunch, discussed business, and suggested various investments. One day, Tanya requested full access to his account so she could better manage their household expenses. "Trust me," she purred, removing her shirt in front of him. "Or are we not a team?" Jackson, caught between his desire and his foolishness, said yes, just as he always did. Ellie, meanwhile, was far from idle. She instinctively knew something was wrong, but she lacked the necessary evidence. It was then that she reached out to her neighbor, Brenda, a woman who had worked for 20 years as an accountant at a pharmaceutical company and was now retired, teaching neighborhood children basic math. "Brenda, I desperately need you to explain something to me. How can I tell if someone is tampering with my accounts?" Brenda frowned slightly. "Your son?" "Yes. Do you have access to your bank statements?" "They no longer come to me." "And transfers?" "I've never initiated one." "I don't even know how to do that." For several consecutive nights, Brenda patiently instructed Ellie on how to log into the bank's online portal using her cell phone, how to meticulously review all transactions, and how to accurately identify deposits and unauthorized withdrawals. The first time she examined the detailed list of transactions, Ellie felt the weight of the entire world collapse onto her. Large sums, recent dates, transfers that perfectly coincided with the days Jackson had visited or asked her for some document. Money was exiting the account without any plausible explanation. "He told me he needed access to do some paperwork. He said it was for insurance." "Ellie, that's not paperwork. That is theft." Her heart shattered into a million pieces, yet she didn't weep. Instead, she requested a blank notebook and began meticulously recording every single transaction, the day, the time, the exact amount. Every stolen dollar now had a record attached to it. One Friday night, when the situation seemed hopeless, Brenda pointed out one more crucial detail. "Do you see this particular transaction? They signed your name here to activate a joint account, but that signature is absolutely not yours. It's a clumsy imitation." Ellie's finger brushed the screen, as if touching a deep, open wound. "They didn't even care enough to conceal it." Eerie, low music swells. "What are you planning to do?" Ellie closed her phone, inhaled deeply, and stated, "Nothing. Not yet." Meanwhile, in Rome, Jackson was starting to experience profound discomfort. It wasn't born of guilt, but because Tanya's attitude toward him had completely shifted. She had become cold. She no longer kissed him with any genuine warmth. She spent hours glued to her phone, laughing quietly to herself. And Rhonda? Rhonda didn't even bother to feign tolerance for him anymore. One evening, while pretending to be asleep, he overheard a conversation between them. "It's accomplished. Why bother keeping up the pretense?" Tanya said. "As soon as we're back, we're liquidating everything and dumping him." "And if he figures it out?" "He's slow. He won't even notice. And even if he does, so what? The old lady is going to die soon anyway. Who exactly is going to defend him?" Ellie, back in Los Angeles, began to operate with surgical precision. She went to a bank branch, requested and printed the complete statements, and filed them into marked envelopes. Then, she visited the public registry office to inquire if any properties she owned had been improperly signed over. There, she uncovered something even more insidious. Jackson had attempted to register her house as a shared investment property using forged documents. He failed only due to a technical processing error, but the attempt had been made. That day, Ellie didn't return directly home. She walked to an old, quiet church behind the neighborhood, not to pray, but just to sit on a rear bench and stare at the altar. "Give me patience, God, not to forgive him, but to prevent me from destroying him with my own hands." Silence embraced her. When she finally returned, she turned on the radio, played a blues tune, and started knitting. But the thing she was weaving was not clothing. It was retribution. The seeds of his ingratitude were already sown, and they were rapidly germinating. The inevitable harvest was fast approaching. Ellie knew it. She sensed it in her bones, in the way the wind whispered through the door cracks, as if arriving to warn her that everything buried in silence would soon burst into the light. The pre-dawn hours felt less burdensome. The cold no longer penetrated her spirit. She simply counted the days, not with anxiety, but with meticulous strategy, with absolute composure, like someone slowly sharpening a blade, knowing they will use it at the exact perfect moment. One morning, while sweeping the living room with the old, reliable straw broom, she decided to shift the armchair to clean beneath it. Underneath lay dust, scraps of paper, a dead pen, and a tattered, poorly folded white envelope concealed within a recycled plastic bag. She was about to toss the entire collection without looking, but a powerful instinct screamed at her to check. She opened the bag first. Inside was a document. She read it twice, still not fully grasping its meaning. It listed her full name, her address, and a signature that resembled hers. Then she saw the title, Last Will and Testament. She felt a crushing pressure tighten her chest. She sat on the floor, the document spread across her lap, and read it again. It was a will that supposedly bequeathed her house and all her savings to Jackson in the event of her death. At the bottom was a signature, her forged signature. The quiet of the house felt heavier than ever. Only the tick-tock of the clocks and the distant bark of a dog broke the stillness. She didn't cry. She wasn't surprised, but this time something truly broke inside her. It wasn't the betrayal itself. It was the chilling confirmation of their malicious intent. She called Walter. "Come over. What is wrong? I found exactly what you needed to see." 2 hours later, Walter sat in her kitchen, holding the document. He read it carefully, shaking his head. "Ellie, this is not just illegal. It is inherently dangerous. If he had successfully filed this, you could have lost the house without ever knowing it. Do you believe he's the one behind this?" Walter remained quiet. He set the paper on the table. "This is not your signature, Ellie, and you have no knowledge of how to draft a will. It is clearly not yours. The most serious part is that this is a draft, and where there is a draft, there was likely a real attempt to file it." Ellie stared at her own wrinkled hands, marked by the years of labor, yet still steady. She remembered the day she finally made the final mortgage payment on that house. 30 years of sacrifice, reheated meals, worn-out shoes, working through the hottest days, scrubbing other people's filth, enduring a boss's shouts, all to own something that was hers, something no one could take. "He wanted to kill me on paper," she stated, her voice steady and low. Walter looked up, unable to discern if her statement was a metaphor or a literal truth. The silence stretched so long that the bubbling of the coffee on the stove became the only sound in the kitchen. "And now, what is your next step?" Ellie smiled, the same smile Jackson hadn't possessed the foresight to understand. "Now I am going to bury him, but I'll bury him while he's wide awake." Not even 3 days passed after that discovery when she received an unexpected call from Dr. Evans, the internist at the health clinic where Ellie had occasional checkups. "I need you to come in, Miss Eleanor, today, if at all possible." She felt a tremor in her legs. She walked to the medical center with the same unwavering dignity with which she had faced every challenge in her life. She entered the office in her typical attire, her scarf tightly knotted, and holding the notebook where she meticulously tracked her medication. The doctor greeted her kindly, but his expression lacked hope. His gaze held a profound compassion that felt like a goodbye. "We ran some new blood tests, and the results are not favorable." She didn't react. She simply looked at him, anticipating the truth she already knew. "You have leukemia, ma'am. It is in an advanced stage. It pains me to deliver this news so bluntly, but there is no time for pleasantries. Your immune system is severely compromised. We estimate you have approximately 6 months." Ellie froze. She stared intently at a fixed point on the wall, a small, bird-shaped patch of dampness. Not a single tear, not one question. "Do you understand what I'm telling you? I understand how much it will cost me to die with my dignity intact." The doctor shifted uncomfortably. "There are options. We could begin chemotherapy, but there's no certainty you'll respond. The treatment is aggressive, and it is very costly. Will it hasten the end of my life?" "Not necessarily." "Then no," she replied. "I dislike the idea of death catching me in a hospital gown." The doctor was speechless. He had never witnessed anyone receive news of their impending death with such remarkable composure. Ellie stood up, collected her purse, and before exiting the office, she turned back to him. 6 months is ample time. For what I have to accomplish, it is more than enough. She walked back home, not because she couldn't afford a ride, but because she needed to feel the city beneath her feet. She wanted every step to ground her to her origins, her history, her purpose. She passed the corner where she was nearly hit by a car while taking Jackson to preschool. She went by the market where she used to clean restrooms for $40 a day. She waved to Mr. Theodore, the juice stand owner who had no teeth but an excellent memory. When she arrived home, she went directly to her room. She pulled out a wooden box hidden beneath her bed. Inside was her notebook of observations, old clippings, receipts, unscented letters, and an ancient envelope holding the only photo she possessed of Jackson as a toddler when he still slept clinging to her leg. She gazed at it for a long time, then turned on the stove, put water to boil, and as the steam began to rise, she murmured to herself, "No more praying now. The work begins." The first action she took was to go with Walter to file a preemptive criminal complaint, not as a mother, but as a concerned citizen. They reported the forgery of her signature and the attempt to illegally appropriate property, attaching all the available evidence. Next, they requested the temporary freezing of the bank account from which Jackson had withdrawn the money. To achieve this, they utilized a legal clause that permits the halting of financial movements when elder financial abuse is suspected. It was a difficult maneuver, but Walter knew the legal loopholes. He had lost his faith in the legal system years ago, but for Ellie, he was willing to fully recommit to his profession. "Are you prepared for the consequences of what is coming?" he asked as they signed the final papers. "I was born ready," she said. "I just didn't realize it until now." Following that, Ellie went to the store, purchased a new notebook bound in bright red, and started writing what would become her final journal. Not a journal for weeping, but one for meticulous documentation. On the first page, she wrote, "To my son Jackson, I gave birth to you from my womb in pain. I gave you my life with love, and you tore away my dignity without a second thought. This is not revenge. It is justice, and justice is all I have remaining to die in peace." Meanwhile, in Rome, Jackson and Tanya continued their charade of happiness. They uploaded daily photos, created filtered videos, and ostentatiously showed off plates of food they couldn't even pronounce. But the underlying tension was becoming palpable. Tanya no longer slept beside him. Rhonda spent all her time texting on her phone, and Jackson felt something vital slipping away, like an unrelenting internal alarm siren. One night, while searching his email for a flight confirmation, he stumbled upon a hidden folder. It was an automated backup of Tanya's text messages with an unknown contact. Initially, he thought it was spam, but when he opened it, he read what he shouldn't have. "Tanya, we almost have everything. The idiot doesn't suspect a thing. Just waiting for the contact and the account. Contact. Done. As soon as we get back, we're leaving him. Contact. What if he finds out? Tanya, I don't care. Let him rot. I'm not staying with a man who smells like a traumatized single mom." Jackson felt his stomach drop out. He closed the computer, said nothing, and pretended to be asleep. But he couldn't close his eyes all night, and for the first time in a very long time, he thought of his mother, of her voice, of the way she called him my little boy, even after he grew taller than her, of her creamy rice pudding, of her laughter at old black and white sitcoms, of how she touched his forehead when he was sick, and of her old mantra, "Nobody will ever care for you like I do." He desperately wanted to call her, but he didn't. Ellie, for her part, expected nothing. There was no longer any emotional tenderness in her waiting, only cold, hard planning. She continued visiting offices, making calls, and activated the immigration clause. She officially declared Jackson's financial transactions as suspicious. The system, though methodical, was activated. An international notification was logged for his mandatory return to the United States. They wouldn't immediately incarcerate him, but they would demand accountability. In the red notebook, Ellie inscribed, "There is no form of justice more complete than the one delivered without a single scream. I will observe him lose everything without ever lifting a finger. Karma is not settled through violence. It is served with infinite patience. And so, the second discovery of betrayal did not crush her. It forged her into something more resolute, more detached, and ultimately, freer. The mother in her had perished, but the woman had fully awakened. It was only a matter of days before Jackson was forced to return to the U.S., utterly oblivious to the emotional earthquake awaiting him. Jackson had always imagined hell as a place of flames, torture, and shrieks. He never conceived it could be as chilling as the ancient cobblestone streets of Rome, or as intensely humiliating as having his card repeatedly declined in a bustling restaurant packed with tourists. It began with a single rejection at the payment terminal. Then another, and another. In under 48 hours, he found himself utterly destitute. No cash, no active bank accounts, and with two women who now regarded him as if he were a homeless vagrant, they had mistakenly brought off the street. Tanya screamed at him publicly, right in the middle of the square, drawing the attention of dozens of passers-by who paused to gawk. "You worthless idiot! What did you do with the money? I warned you not to rely on your poverty-stricken mother. Now you've ruined everything for us." Jackson attempted to respond, but he couldn't form the words to articulate what he himself barely understood. All he knew was that something was terribly wrong, that his accounts were frozen solid, that his name was now linked to an international financial fraud inquiry, and that he was required to report to the American embassy the very next day. That evening, Rhonda looked at him with an undisguised mix of disgust and irritation. "I told you, Tanya. This boy isn't even capable of washing dishes properly. I'm checking into a hostel. I refuse to sleep in this hovel another night." Tanya promptly followed her out. No exchange of words, no farewell. Jackson remained alone in the hotel room, with a half-unpacked suitcase and the deafening echo of betrayal ringing in his ears. Meanwhile, in Los Angeles, Ellie was weaving the final threads of her plan, like laying out a heavy winter blanket. Everything fit perfectly. Every action made strategic sense. Walter assisted her in compiling the critical documents required to activate the international capital block, relying on the complaint of fraudulent abuse of an elderly person's accounts. He contacted an old colleague, Mr. Ernest, a federal agent in the IRS Criminal Investigation Division, and successfully activated an alert for illicit fund withdrawal. This required Jackson to undergo a mandatory review upon his entry into U.S. territory. It wasn't vengeance. There was no hatred involved. It was purely justice. In her red notebook, she wrote, "Sometimes a mother's love must also inflict pain, not from malice, but to deliver a lesson, because what is allowed will be repeated, and what is repeated will inevitably rot. I did not give birth to a thief, but the world corrupted him. And if I must be the one to apply the brake, then so be it." Brenda silently supported her through many of these procedures. She was no longer just a neighbor. She had become a devoted accomplice. "Doesn't this hurt you, Ellie?" "Of course it hurts," Ellie replied. "It feels like tearing off my own skin. But there are certain pains that lead to healing." The meeting at the embassy became a spectacle of deep shame for Jackson. They escorted him into a cold, featureless room with a junior lawyer and a translator who spoke in a monotone voice. They explained that a criminal complaint was active in the U.S., that his funds were frozen via a preemptive court order, and that he would have to account for them immediately upon his return. Jackson left with a look of utter defeat. He felt his entire life crumbling. He thought of his mother. For the first time in ages, he recalled her voice, her steady gaze, and he understood with chilling clarity that all of this originated with her. And then, like a child utterly lost, he dialed her number. "Mom," he said the instant she answered. On the other end, Ellie was in her kitchen, meticulously cleaning black-eyed peas with her old strainer, behaving as if absolutely nothing out of the ordinary were taking place. She recognized the voice instantly. Her hand trembled, but not enough to drop the phone. "Mom, what in the world did you do? They took every penny from me. I'm completely alone. Tanya left, Rhonda too. They say this is all your fault." Ellie remained silent, drew a long, slow breath, and then answered with a composed, firm voice. As if speaking from a place Jackson could no longer reach. "I didn't take anything from you, son. I simply stopped what you were taking from me." "Mom, they're talking about arresting me. You promised you would always be there for me." "I was always there until you stopped being there for yourself. Please." "You have to help me. I don't know what to do." "Learn." She hung up. She gave him nothing further. No tears, no apologies, no explanations. It was the first time she allowed herself to believe that her son needed to genuinely suffer to finally understand. Because sometimes anguish is a more effective teacher than love. That night, Ellie did not sleep, not from anxiety, but because she sat down to write him a letter. It wasn't a final goodbye. It was an emotional testament, a letter she intended to leave on the very last page of the red notebook. It was for him, for his return. "My dearest Jackson, you were my entire reason for getting up every single morning. You were my battle, my strength, my greatest pride. I gave you everything I possessed, and even what I didn't. I denied myself food, rest, and companionship for your sake, and I do not regret it. I did it out of love. But you forgot who you were. You surrounded yourself with phantoms wearing expensive perfume, and in their desperate attempt to destroy me while I was still alive, they forced me to wake up. I do not hate you. I simply could not. But I am no longer the woman who silently waits for her son to remember her existence. Now, I am the one who teaches you, even if the lesson hurts. And if you ever truly find repentance, this letter will be here. Not to rescue you, but so you can never claim that no one ever warned you." At the close of the letter, she drew a small, delicate heart. It was the last vestige of sweetness she had left to offer. Jackson wandered the streets of Rome without purpose. He slept in shabby hostels. Some days he ate, others he didn't. He had nobody left to call. Neither Tanya nor Rhonda picked up his calls. He knew his return to the U.S. would not be a soft landing. It would be a catastrophic crash. Finally, he boarded a return flight, terrified, consumed by shame, and chilled to the core. He knew they were waiting for him, not with embraces, but with overwhelming, outstanding debts. Ellie, for her part, was prepared. Her physical health was declining, but her spirit was clearer than it had ever been. She had shaved her head herself before the chemotherapy could claim her hair, using sewing scissors in her bathroom. She looked into the mirror and said, "Now I truly look like who I am." Walter accompanied her to her final doctor's appointment. The physician confirmed that the cancer was progressing at a rapid pace. She simply nodded. "You know," she said, "I was never afraid to die. What hurt was the thought of not leaving in peace. But now I know I will depart with every single thing settled." That night, alone in her bed, Ellie felt a sharp, agonizing pain in her chest. She doubled over but refused to call anyone. She merely hugged herself tightly, whispering her son's name, not as a lament, but as a final farewell. The silence of the storm was precisely that. The exact instant before the collapse, the deceptive calm preceding the inevitable. But Ellie did not dread the end, because she had done what she had to do, and Jackson was about to confront the wreckage of the life he himself had demolished. When the plane landed in the U.S., Ellie experienced no rush of emotion. She was untouched by the captain's welcome or the peculiar mix of languages in the airport announcements. She cared nothing for the glass ceilings or the foreign faces. She hadn't traveled to admire a thing. She had traveled to conclude a cycle, not as a mother, but as an impartial witness. At nearly 70 years old, her body certainly trembled, but not from fear. The constant physical pain was now merely part of the background. What sustained her was her unwavering objective. She had sold a few items to afford the ticket: her blender, the large living room mirror, and a small ring she'd kept since Jackson was a boy. She felt no regret. The financial cost was meaningless compared to the emotional freedom she was securing. Walter was waiting for her at the airport. He had arrived a day earlier to organize all the arrangements. He had leveraged his connections, processed the necessary permits, and arranged for Ellie to be present at the embassy when Jackson gave his testimony. It wasn't legally required, but the consular official was an old acquaintance who also happened to be the son of a single mother. He grasped the gravity of her request without needing excessive explanation. When he spotted her walking toward him, Walter removed his hat. "You don't look like a woman about to confront her son." "And you don't look like a lawyer who's retired," Ellie countered, not quite looking at him. "Are you certain you want to do this?" "I am still alive. That is all the certainty I need." They walked to the car. During the drive, Walter attempted to lighten the mood with a few old anecdotes, but Ellie offered no response. She wasn't there for conversation. She had one last task to complete. In her purse, she carried a thick yellow envelope containing items that held no material worth, but an immeasurable, eternal weight. Meanwhile, in a hotel room on the other side of the city, Jackson stood before the mirror. His eyes were deeply sunken, his beard was unkempt, and his expression swung wildly between utter exhaustion and outright panic. He was on his way to the American embassy to sign an official declaration that would officially separate him from the joint accounts with his mother. But he knew that by signing, he would also be admitting he had managed those accounts using fraudulent documentation. In exchange, the embassy had agreed not to formally arrest him, but to flag him on an economic watch list, and his return to the U.S. would be strictly conditional. He would be required to report to a federal financial authority immediately upon stepping onto American soil. As he descended to the hotel lobby, he saw Tanya waiting. She wore large, dark sunglasses and a bright red coat that looked borrowed. Her face reflected neither affection nor resentment, only cold calculation. "You're late," Tanya said irritably. "I wasn't aware you were coming. You also weren't aware you were so useless. And yet here we are. What do you want?" "I came to watch you crash." Jackson clenched his fists. Her words no longer hurt him. What was devastating was the realization that he had allowed himself to be manipulated by a woman who considered him entirely expendable. Upon arrival at the embassy, officials guided them into a stark, silent waiting room with cold metal chairs. Tanya loudly chewed gum as if she were at a shopping center. Jackson was sweating profusely. Every minute felt like an hour. Then the door opened and Ellie entered. She wore a simple gray sweater, a long skirt, and a dark blue scarf draped over her shoulders. Her now sparse hair was covered with a dark bandana. She walked slowly but with perfect posture. In her hands, she held the yellow envelope. When she crossed the room, her eyes met Jackson's. He abruptly stood up. "What are you doing here?" he asked, his voice cracking. "I came to watch you sign," she stated. "Not as a mother. As a witness." Tanya let out a rough, cynical laugh. "How touching." The old woman came for her final dramatic performance. Ellie looked at her, not with hatred, but with a deep, quiet pity. "You took everything she had," she said softly. "But I taught him something he will never have again." "Forgiveness?" Tanya scoffed. "Forgiveness, ma'am? Your son is a failure. You raised a parasite. No, I raised a good boy. You turned him into this, and he allowed you to do it." Jackson squeezed his eyes shut. He couldn't bear it any longer. "Mom, I don't know when I lost myself." Ellie approached him, offering him the envelope. "Here are your pictures, the very first ones from when you learned to walk and write. Here is your first letter to Santa Claus. Once, you asked me for a bicycle, and I told you only if you earned an A in math, and you did. I kept my promise, son." Jackson took the envelope, his hands shaking uncontrollably. "And here is also the letter I wrote you," Ellie continued. "Not to save you, but so you can never say no one gave you fair warning." They sat down. The embassy official entered and briefly explained the procedure. Jackson signed the documents. In that precise moment, the camera of an American tourist waiting for his passport recorded a portion of the final exchange. The images later showed Ellie standing, her eyes visibly moist, saying, "You were my entire life, but I was never yours. Today, I fully understand that. You were not born to love me, only to serve as my mirror." The recording was uploaded to social media that very day. In a few hours, it went completely viral. People commented from every corner of the globe, "That mother is a queen. That is how you teach a lesson without violence. Dignity doesn't recognize age." Jackson could not lift his head. The official looked at him with sympathy. "You are done. You may both leave." Tanya had already departed. She didn't wait for anyone. She stormed off exactly as she had arrived, without an apology, without a soul. On their walk back toward the hotel, Ellie and Jackson moved in profound silence down a narrow Roman street. On a corner, she came to a halt. "This is the point where we separate." "Mom," he tried to say, but his voice broke. "I gave you everything I possessed, even my complete silence. Now, I give you the only thing you have refused to accept, the truth. Will you forgive me?" "I already forgave you. The real issue is that you have not yet forgiven yourself. Is there anything I can do now?" "Yes, live with what you have done and make it count for something significant." Ellie turned and walked away slowly. She never saw him again. That night, Jackson opened the envelope in his room. The photographs were faded and yellowed but perfectly intact. The letter, written in faint blue ink, carried the lingering scent of lavender. When he finished reading it, the entire world collapsed around him. He fell to his knees on the floor and cried with a desperation he hadn't known since he was a small child. Not from the severity of the punishment, but from the searing weight of shame. He knew he had lost something irreplaceable, the dignity of a mother. And he understood that justice, when delivered by the one who loved you most, is the most agonizing of all. Jackson returned to the U.S. in silence. Without luggage, without grand promises, and without any glory, he passed through customs like an apparition. No cameras flashed, no family waited for him, no one inquired about his trip. The only possessions he carried were the yellow envelope holding his childhood photos and the devastating letter his mother had left him. Everything else was lost. The Los Angeles airport seemed bleaker than he remembered. The air felt heavy, dense, as if his guilt was suspended in the atmosphere. He had nowhere to go. Tanya wasn't answering calls. His former mother-in-law had blocked every contact. His old office colleagues feigned ignorance. He had been publicly exposed on social media, ridiculed by thousands, and permanently branded as the ungrateful son who stole from his mother to take his wife and her mother on a European holiday. He walked the streets of the neighborhood where he had been raised. South Central was unchanged. The same potholes, the same faded graffiti on the walls, the same street vendors selling their wares at twilight. But something profound within him had irreversibly changed. Every street corner held an echo, a memory, a silent reproach. He passed his old school. He vividly remembered his mother walking him there, holding his hand, her apron faintly smelling of bleach and her shoes worn down to the soles. She always said, "You will not spend your life scrubbing floors like me. You will have your own desk and your own suit." And he had it for a short while until he exchanged it for lies. Ellie was already back. She had returned alone. She needed no company. She had lived her whole life with her silence as her companion, and it held no burden for her. She settled back into her house with its cracked walls, the same concrete floor, and the rocking chair that creaked rhythmically when she swayed. She settled into her life like someone returning to the sanctuary they should never have left. Walter brought her medication. Brenda prepared light, nourishing soups for her. The closest neighbors cared for her in spontaneous shifts, not because she asked, but because dignity is also honored while one is still alive. She had become a quiet neighborhood legend. Some children believed she had journeyed to punish the wicked. Others thought she was a powerful witch. Still others simply knew she had stood up to an injustice. Only a few people knew the whole truth, and they never spoke of it. Ellie didn't speak much. She listened to blues music in the afternoons. Sometimes she watched the neighborhood children play from her doorway. She laughed with them. She gave them lollipops, listening with intense focus when they told their innocent childhood fibs. She had recovered her inner peace, but not her physical strength. The cancer was progressing, slowly but relentlessly. With every passing week, she seemed more fragile. Her clothes now hung loosely on her frame. Her hands trembled more noticeably. Yet she never ceased moving within her house. She absolutely refused to surrender or fall. One bright Sunday morning, Jackson approached the front door. He carried a small bag of donuts. He had wrestled with himself all night, debating whether he should even come. He hadn't slept or eaten, but something deep inside compelled him forward. He didn't expect her to open the door. He simply needed to see her, to confirm she was still alive. From the opposite sidewalk, he saw her seated in her rocking chair. She wore an old sweater and had a shawl draped over her shoulders. Her face was gaunt but showed no sign of defeat. She was smiling at a few children playing nearby. One little boy brought her a wild-picked flower, and she hugged him with the fierce affection one reserves for one's own kin. Jackson didn't cross the street. He simply stood watching her. He felt an agonizing lump in his throat. He walked slowly, placed the bag of donuts gently on the porch, and departed. Ellie never looked up, yet she sensed his presence. She did not open the door. Not that day. Over the following weeks, Jackson repeatedly returned, always at the same hour. He consistently left small tokens, flowers, pastries, a brief unsigned note. He never found the courage to knock. He never asked to be let in. He had forfeited that right. He was simply serving his penance, unsure if the debt could ever be settled. One night, Ellie took up her red notebook, turned to the final page, and with a now deeply shaking hand, inscribed her concluding message. It was concise, just like her life's core truth. My son, love is not something to be demanded. It is freely given. If you have grasped that lesson, then you are not truly lost. Do not search for me when I am gone. I will reside in every mistake you choose not to repeat. I will be in every single act of kindness you perform without expecting anything in return. If you desire to truly forgive yourself, you must begin by forgiving others. And if you ever manage to see your mother reflected in the eyes of another woman, do not fail her. That will be my redemption. She signed the note with her full name. She folded the letter, sealed it in an envelope, and wrote on the outside in bold black ink, "For Jackson." The morning she drew her last breath was brilliantly sunny. Sunlight streamed effortlessly through the windows. The red notebook, the addressed envelope, and a hand-knitted blanket lay gently on her lap. The neighbors discovered her surrounded by park flowers that the local children had left. Her face bore a look of absolute serenity, a peace few achieve in their passing. There was no turmoil, no sound of distress, only the perfect calm that follows a storm. Walter was the first to arrive. He stood observing her in silence, then gently closed her eyes. He did not weep. He knew she would not want tears. He knew she had died exactly as she had lived, with unwavering dignity. Brenda organized the wake with the community's help. It was humble but overflowing with genuine affection. They refused elaborate floral arrangements, accepting only flowers picked from the park, drawings made by children, and the blues songs she cherished. Jackson was never explicitly told, but he knew. He knew the instant the wind shifted and something in his own heart extinguished. He ran to the house, saw the slightly open door, and walked in slowly. Candles flickered in the living room. No one attempted to stop him. No one embraced him. He went directly to his mother's body. He knelt down, touching her hands. They were cold now. Next to her, he found the envelope addressed with his name. He tore it open. He read every word aloud, alone, in a broken whisper. He wept, but unlike before, he cried in silence, just as she had. In one corner of the room lay an open wooden box. Inside was a photograph of him as a child with a single, handwritten note on the back. "I still believe in you, son." Jackson took the photo, pressing it tightly against his chest, then walked out to the yard and sat in the creaking chair where she used to rest. He gazed up at the sky and finally understood that while he had lost his mother, he still held a chance to find himself. Days later, the neighbors remarked that the man who brought the donuts remained living in the house. He acquired no new furniture or luxuries. He had no visitors, only an old rocking chair, a red notebook, and a small photo sitting on a shelf. Those who depart create space. Those who remain sometimes fill it with enduring memory and sometimes with quiet redemption. Did you find yourself drawn into this story? I'd love to know which city you're listening from. Let's connect in the comments below. If you appreciated the story, please consider supporting my work by sending a super thanks so I can keep bringing you more true-to-life narratives like this. Thank you so much for your generous support. I genuinely look forward to reading your thoughts on this story. On the screen now, you can find 2 new life stories that I highly recommend. There is much more available on my channel. Don't forget to subscribe. See you in the next life story, with love and respect.